That wish you'd never made, by po_tato2. Chapter 5. Fuck the gov, or something like that. There's a wave of curiosity and aggressiveness coming from a group of people that Izuku can tell must be hovering right outside the classroom, and he sighs to himself. What a pain in the ass. He hasn't moved from his chair as he debates with himself whether it's worth it to just hop out of the window and avoid what is sure to be an annoying encounter that'll only raise his blood pressure. Shigaraki-kun? Shinso's voice, smooth and hypnotic by design, comes from behind him, and he turns around with an eyebrow raised. What do you know that I don't? Shinso asks, in what could almost be considered a teasing tone of voice, his face inexpressive but his eyes shining. Izuku considers him for a brief moment before he decides to indulge him. There's a mob of angry students waiting outside the door. Shinso immediately slumps over onto his desk like a puppet without strings. He proceeds to groan long and loud, not unlike a dying cow. It nearly makes Izuku laugh. Nearly. What the fuck? He mumbles into his desk, drawing out the last word. I was contemplating jumping out of the window, Izuku tells him, then, immediately after, wonders why he said that. To escape, he adds belatedly. Sitting back up, Shinso leans forward, his tired eyes staring into Izuku's. Now that's an idea I can get behind. Unfortunately, a dry voice says behind Shinso, causing him to yelp and jerk around. The windows are made of fortified glass that even Present Mic cannot break at his highest frequency. Izuku looks up into the unamused stare of Aizawa-san. I'm sure I could think of a way. Aizawa must realize that Izuku is serious because his quirk flares for a moment. Problem, child? No. I'll leave you to deal directly with Nezu if you break a window. The threat does make Izuku slump because he knows Aizawa will follow through. I'm one of the most powerful beings in Japan, and yet I'm not allowed to jump through the window, he muses to himself silently. Inwardly shrugging, Izuku stands up and goes to lean down and grab his backpack. There's no point in lingering around now that he knows there's only one way out after all. A loud commotion from the door snatches his attention, and a brief flick of his eyes confirms that someone has opened the door to the classroom, and his classmates are now staring down a crowd of students who are boxing them in. Ida starts saying something loudly enough to be borderline yelling, his hands chopping and nearly taking out several people. What was certainly a chastisement is not taken well by the crowd, and voices raised, getting louder. No one is going to be moving anytime soon, for fuck's sake. Izuku leans back up, bending his neck to the side. As he does, a loud crack sounding. Do I have to do everything myself? His approach is more than enough to send his classmates skittering out of his way, leaving the way clear for him to approach the mob of idiots crowding the hallway. Shinso, oddly close behind him. A blonde boy at the front, DNA contact, emitter, copy, time limitation, sneers at him. Izuku makes an immediate note not to let him touch him, even if he is curious about whether or not the kid will be able to copy every quirk he currently has, or just his original. What's the problem? Izuku says loudly. Immediately, the blonde kid is more than happy to take the lead. The problem, he declares, pointing a finger at Izuku, is that Class 1A has arrogantly grabbed the spotlight. I suppose you're talking about the villain attack on the USJ? Izuku says calmly, which seems to throw the boy off a little. Regardless, he seems more than capable of hyping himself up, because he regains steam, puffing his chest out. Yes, that's right, but I'm here to tell you that Class 1B is going to show all of you up at the sports festival, so all of you better keep your eyes open, because before you know it, Class 1B will be stealing the spotlight from beneath you. Clap, clap, clap. Wow! Izuku draws as he slow claps. Really cool speech. I mean, I'm nearly shaking. Red flushes up the blonde's face, but Izuku is far from done. He takes a step forward, pressing closer to the crowd, and lets his hands fall down by his sides. However, I gotta say, I'm pretty fucking curious about something. The sudden curse makes several people flinch, as does the way the fake smile that Izuku is wearing slides off his face. What do you think a villain attack is? Izuku takes another step forward, and the look on his face is hard and flat now. the look someone wears when they don't care if you live or die. The boy takes a step back. You seem to think it was similar to the media crowding the gate the other day. You seem to think that the villains, Izuku suddenly snarls, and the entire crowd flinches, moving back as one. We're carrying around fucking cameras. You seem to think they were lining up for our autographs. Izuku's cold eyes narrowed, and he moved, genuine anger in his chest. Just to make sure you understand the concept, let me tell you what fucking happened. The crowd has backed up enough that they aren't as condensed anymore, but Izuku doesn't stop advancing on the blonde boy, who's staring at him just like someone does when they realize they've made a great miscalculation. We were scattered by a teleportation quirk, and left in groups of 2 and 3, no adults, no methods of communication, no information on what the hell was happening. 10 or more villains were in every location, waiting to fight the students. The leader had a giant mutant creature which was powered to defeat All Might that had powers of regeneration. Izuku did not feel the need to share all the private details he was privy to, such as the fact that the leader had issued no kill orders. Imagine being a student, somehow managing to fight off a group of villains and surviving. Then, imagine. Izuku let his lip curl up, hatred in his eyes in a way that made the blonde flinch back hard enough to hit the wall of the hallway. Being told it was our fault, and that we did it for attention. That wasn't what I meant, the kid managed to rasp, and Izuku rolled his eyes, dismissing him and the incident entirely as he bothers to say, I'm sure, as parting words. He turned around, ignoring the way the crowd had scattered around him like an explosion, and the way all of his classmates were staring at him. Surprisingly, Shinso was waiting for him, holding his backpack out in one hand. Thanks, Izuku said, shrugging it on, then turning to head to the lunchroom. The way people jerked out of his way would be funnier if they didn't look so terrified. Instead of funny, though, it's just fucking pathetic. But that's just Izuku's opinion. Who knows what the others are thinking? Something that sounds a lot like monster. Mind if I sit? Shinso appears next to where Izuku is eating alone at the end of a lunch table. Izuku cuts his eyes over to him and shrugs. Shinso must take that answer as a yes, because he pulls out the chair next to Izuku and slides into it. Once again, Izuku reaches out for the intent quirk, more out of habit than anything else. Shinso's behavior confuses him, after all, and Izuku does not like being confused. Intrigue, stubbornness, friendship, attraction. Wait, what? Izuku surges back into the intent quirk, even as he automatically continues to eat. He must have felt the wrong strand, surely. Focusing in on Shinso, Izuku slowed down and peered at the brightest colored strings that represented how Shinso felt towards Izuku. Plucking one, Izuku looked into it. Intrigue, watching Izuku's 5 fingers pass over Urara's shoulder, catching the sight of hatred in his eyes when the number 1 hero speaks. The class watching Izuku spar with Aizawa and keep up. Izuku on the first day of school as the class finds out about his quirk. Izuku vanishing after class, catching sight of Izuku staring off into space with eyes full of longing. Looking out, Izuku peers into another, a feeling he can't name welling up in him. Stubbornness, following Izuku as he darts through the hallways to lunch, ignoring the suspicious glance on Izuku's face as he speaks to him, arguing against Izuku's views on the bus to the USJ, gritting his teeth as they spar, starting conversation after conversation after conversation. There's a hint of a smile on Izuku's face before he wipes it off, diving into the third thread. Friendship, partnering for an English project, Shinso resting his head on the table and smiling as Izuku snorted, walking next to each other in comfortable silence. Shinso glancing at Izuku and rolling his eyes as All Might speaks, and catching the delighted look on Izuku's face before he can wipe it away. Right now as he sits next to Izuku as they eat lunch in easy silence. Pushing away the friendship strand, his chest tight, Izuku looks at the last bright strand. There are plenty of other, thinner and paler threads, of course, but those aren't as reliable. Izuku looks into the last strand and sees attraction, a half-open green eye peering out from beneath white hair. Shinso turning around in the locker room and catching a glimpse of Izuku's bare back and shoulders. Izuku breathing heavily and leaning over Shinso after winning another spar. Izuku approaching the blonde boy with anger in every step he takes. Gasping, Izuku yanks his head out of the attraction strand and then surfaces from the intent quirk altogether. He blinks, suddenly finding himself looking down at a half-eaten tray of food. His heart suddenly beating much faster than it was a minute ago. His hands tremble just barely. Shigaraki-kun? Snapping his head to the side, Izuku sees that Shinso has tilted his head to glance at him out of the corner of his eye. He hides concern well, but Izuku can tell nonetheless. No. A voice that sounds like his own echoes in Izuku's head. Forget about what you saw. None of that matters, and it will only distract both you and him. You want him to succeed, don't you? And don't forget... Izuku inhales. Sorry, something went down the wrong way. Shinso's look lingers for a second longer, then leaves. Whatever, man. You cannot afford to fail. The voice finishes, and Izuku knows that he is right. Too much is at stake for him to be worrying about things like a high schooler's feelings. Feelings are fickle, a high schooler's even more. Shinso's thoughts and feelings will fade in a few weeks, and everything will go back to how it should be. The sports festival is already ruining Izuku's day, and he only woke up 5 minutes ago. You're being dramatic, a dry voice says as Izuku lies his face down in his bed, slowly suffocating into his pillow. A long groan is the only answer Aizawa receives. It's only an hour earlier than you usually get up, Izuku-kun. Ignoring the fact that Aizawa is right, Izuku makes a vague effort of wiggling around for a moment, only to flop into stillness a second later when his wriggling doesn't get him magically out of bed. I'm gonna let Izashi get a picture of you if you don't get up, Aizawa threatens, and Izuku's head jolts up. That is a very real threat, he learned, and he'd also learned that Hizashi had no qualms about printing out photos of Izuku and putting them on his desk next to equally random and ugly photos of Aizawa. It was not heartwarming, and it was in fact embarrassing and ruining his reputation. With that very real threat on mind, Izuku forces himself out of bed, mentally cursing Aizawa the entire time. It was still odd to hear his given name from Aizawa, but he didn't regret giving him and Yamada permission to use it a couple of days ago. They told him that he could call them Hizashi and Shota, but that was a hard pass. For now. The three of them arrive at school early, and Izuku is left to wander as Aizawa and Yamada are immediately wrapped up in finishing details for the sports festival. Fortunately, he doesn't have to wait long until his classmates begin to show up, and, before long, Yamada, or Present Mic right now, peeks his head into the classroom and tells him to head down to the stadium locker rooms to change. Izuku is already changed and leaning his head against the wall, eyes closed, when he senses someone walk up to him. Cracking his eyes open, he meets two different colored eyes, both of them just as fat and emotionless as Izuku's. Can I help you? Izuku says dryly, when Todoroki just stands there, staring for an awkwardly long period of time. Another pause, and then, with no introduction whatsoever, I can tell we're similar, the two of us, but still. Todoroki clenches his fist. I'm stronger, and I will beat you. Call me, and Izuku thought his social skills were lacking. There is silence for the briefest moment, but just as the room goes to get loud, everyone with something to say, Izuku responds with a look of disdain. Why do you think I give a shit? Excuse me? The abrupt change on Todoroki's face to confusion would almost be funny if this whole exchange weren't so annoying. Izuku straightens up from the wall, looking fully at Todoroki, his eyes twitching. You heard me. I don't care. What? There's mutters coming from the other people now, but Izuku continues, his temper rising. We're fucking 15, Todoroki, and this is a school festival. Last week, real villains invaded campus. This isn't that fucking serious to me, but Aizawa told me I couldn't opt out. The room gapes at Izuku, as if the very idea of purposely not participating in the sports festival is blasphemy. Todoroki looks like his world is crumbling, but Izuku doesn't have time to sugarcoat things for him. So you can chill out with your edgelord routine? Shinso has to slap a hand over his mouth when Izuku says this, because I could truly not give less of a fuck. The UA Sports Festival is something I consider to be a representation of the biggest faults of Hero Society, and it's a waste of my time. Ida looks like he's actually about to pass out, and more than one person is just staring aghast at Izuku like he's spoken sudden and complete nonsense. Why are you acting like this is unexpected? Kaminari suddenly pops up as the room sits in silence. Come on guys, it totally fits that Shigaraki-kun would say something like that. This breaks the frozen layer of ice Izuku has put over the room, and a couple of weak chuckles ring out. Movement starts up again, and everyone finishes locking away their belongings and straightening out their clothes. Shinso slides up to Izuku, a glint in his eye. I can't believe you called Todoroki-kun an edgelord. He snorts, and it's only from input with his intent quirk, attraction, amusement, worry, stubbornness, respect, friendship, that keeps Izuku from walking away completely in frustration. Unlike most others, Shinso tends to have more than one intention when he comes to talk to Izuku. And if Izuku ignores the intent of friendship, if he pretends it's a fluke or a misread, if he's convinced no one will ever see him as more than a monster, a weapon, well, then no one will ever know. Today is such a waste of time, Izuku says, with no inflection in his voice and no expression on his face. A single pat on his shoulder startles Izuku, who darts narrowed eyes over to an unsympathetic Shinso. It's just a couple hours. Power through. Shinso is right, Izuku reflects, so he only nods, then heads to the group of their class that's standing in one of the tunnel entrances, waiting to be introduced onto the field. Around him is chaos as his classmates frantically exchange tips, worry, and hype each other up in equal measure. Ida is shouting and trying to corral everyone, which, of course, makes things twice as bad. Part of Izuku mentally checks out of the whole thing, and he's not even remotely listening to whatever's being said as Present Mic officially starts the sports festival. He follows his class when they go out, eyes alert but mind glazed over. And for the sports festival introduction speech, we have Shigaraki-Izuku, the highest scorer in the entrance exam. Midnight calls, one hand propped on her hip and the other held out vaguely towards the cluster of students. Huh. They didn't tell him he'd be doing this. Ugh. Maybe in the hero exam, Izuku can hear someone say with annoyance. Izuku's eyes narrow as he moves forward and walks up the stairs to the podium. He taps the mic a single time, and when he's sure it's working, the first thing he does is look directly at the student he heard speaking before. Actually, no. Not just the hero exam. The academic exam as well. The student in question, fox, ears, nose, tail, hearing, sense, amplifier, sensory, smell, flushes red. Izuku looks away from her and surveys the crowd. Sorry, that was a personal question I wanted to answer before I began. They didn't tell me I'd be making the speech, so forgive me if I seem a little unprepared. Izuku says with a grin so sweet it's sickly. Since I don't have any prepared words of advice or wisdom, I will instead briefly give you all my thoughts on the sports festival. The crowd is undoubtedly focused intensely on Izuku and his incredible unconventional speech. Izuku hides a smirk, all of his classmates pale, except for Shinso, who looks like Christmas came early. I think the UA Sports Festival is one of the most damaging things to the societal idea of heroes, and the images it perpetuates of who and what a hero must be is problematic and borderline discriminatory. Watching every single face around him turn into a mask of shock, confusion, anger, and fear is a high Izuku will never forget. Midnight goes pale after he finishes his first sentence, and lunges forward to grab the mic from him, but he ducks and slides back, because he isn't quite finished. Even if we ignore the very obvious problem of being skewed to emitter and strength quirks, the sports festival instills the idea of a ranking system and a rivalry among your comrades early on. Midnight's smile is very fake, and her eyes rage at Izuku, who feels cheeky enough to wink at her. He doesn't want to be doused with sleeping gas, so he's almost out of time. I'm short on time, but you should all think about how wise it would be to be taught to fight the people who are on your side instead of the criminals and villains you pledged to stop. Just as Midnight's hand goes for her sleeve, Izuku tosses the mic to her, and with this silence comes an absolute outroar of noise from the crowd, and from the students below. Izuku is quick to dart to the steps and slip back into the student crowd before Midnight can think about doing anything funny, and although his classmates flinch away from him, he catches more than one face thinking. Izuku doesn't realize he's moved back to Shinso's side automatically until he's there, but the elbow he gets to his side, paired with a wide, slightly unhinged grin, makes Izuku wonder if this is what having a friend feels like. Yamada is shouting something over the loudspeakers with enthusiasm, and then Midnight is spinning a wheel, her smile still plastic. They are clearly trying to move past his speech as fast as possible. Izuku knows Yamada is being ordered to, and besides, lingering on it would do no good. The message has been planted in people's minds. Izuku ignores whatever's being called out. He doesn't need to know. He moves with the crowd to the starting position, and, riding off the adrenaline high that comes from pissing off a stadium of 10,000 people, tugs Shinso's sleeve. Good luck, he says slowly, then lets go and pushes him forward as he stays behind. A long silence, then a horn blares. Go! Yamada yells. Everyone starts to move, and Izuku stays completely still. He's more than aware he could sweep the entire festival with a little effort, but, quite frankly, he just doesn't fucking want to. This is why he doesn't move as everyone, even general and business course students, make at least a vague effort to walk through the course. He ignores Yamada's call of, Shigaraki-Izuku of Class 1A still hasn't moved. Could this be some sort of complex strategy? Izuku does allow himself to smirk at Aizawa's response, however, which is a dry, based on his speech, I doubt it. There's noise from the crowd, noise from the commentation, but the entire time, Izuku doesn't so much as take a step forward, and when it's been announced that the first 41 people have passed the finish line, ending the first race, Izuku turns around and walks off the field without so much as a backward glance. Somewhere, in the back of a dark, dank bar, Shigaraki Tomura laughs so hard he nearly falls off his bar stool, and, far below him, a man centuries old ponders his son's actions.